Welcome, everyone. I'm Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice. Super excited to have my good friend, former client, good friend, Alec Burlakoff to our show today. And I wanted to initiate this interview in part because on the 27th of October, a big show is coming out on Netflix. Emily Blunt, Chris Evans, a show called Pain Hustlers. And I know, Alec, at times Hollywood can sensationalize events. That's what they tend to do. And before this movie comes out that I know you contributed to, I wanted our audience to hear directly from you, your background, lessons learned, how you got here. With that said, welcome. And can you tell us how you became embroiled in a government investigation?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I do appreciate it. Good to see you. You're a friend of mine as well, through these years. As far as what got me kind of wrapped up in this, I was the head of sales or vice president, senior vice president at Insys Therapeutics. We promoted a Schedule II opioid called Subsys. It was a spray, fentanyl spray. And we essentially paid doctors, mock speaker programs, like, just a facade, right? So they were getting paid to basically have dinner and wine. And, we were hoping that would indeed result in them prescribing more Subsys. And, it turned out to be quid pro quo. And I was charged and indicted with racketeering. I pled guilty to RICO Conspiracy.
I know Alec spoke with me at the Marshall School of Business at USC, and we shared this story, Alec, that few people wake up with aspirations to ruin their career, go to prison, wake up to see the Department of Justice issuing these devastating, scathing press releases. Can you help us understand when you felt you faced that first dilemma, right? Did you see mentors doing it, getting away with it, advancing their career? We're going to get more into the details of the case, but when did you face that first dilemma, and why did you decide to act on the impulse to cross the line?
Well, I mean, first, I want to backtrack real quick because you had mentioned that movie, The Pain Hustlers. And you made a really good point that it's something that sits with me. It's an area of concern because, this movie's coming out and what? It's a movie, right? It's entertainment. So it's supposed to put people in chairs and keep them there. That being said, I'm concerned that the movie is based on the Insys story, or at least they say it's loosely based on the Insys story. And they do, in fact, say it's based on the book, The Hard Sell by Evan Hughes, which was renamed Pain Hustlers. So that's my story. I was the head of sales there. And, I've got two kids. I've got girls. I worry that they'll come away with the wrong message because although I haven't seen the movie, I can assure you that the message that's conveyed in that movie is, a complete 180 from the message that I'm looking to convey at this point in my life. And now to your other question, regarding when I kind of saw that line and I crossed it, I would say I was literally in high school. I was playing, high school basketball, and my dad was, kind of my mentor and coach, and, kind of just gave me every kind of tip under the sun to cross the line, and get a little edge, whether it be mentally, athletically, physically. But, I've always tried to get the edge, and I've always done it at all cost. So, crossing the line when I got into my professional career, I hate to say it, but it didn't take a whole lot of coercing. I wanted, again, to be successful, but this time professionally, financially. So when I was basically shown the path to the world of unspoken, I went willingly.
I want to talk for a moment about the culture. I have said before, I was always influenced by my culture around good athletes, good coaches that held me accountable. Then when I worked my way into the brokerage world, I was involved in a different culture, and I tended to descend to the bottom and act accordingly. And I looked up to men who made a lot of money, who were successful in my eyes because they made money, but I might have ignored they have 3 drinks before they go home. They're on their 3rd marriage, right? All I cared about was the advancement of it. I'd like to talk about the culture that you were involved in. Were you encouraged, not excusing what you've done, were you encouraged to cheat, or were you kind of going rogue and on your own? Help us understand that culture that you worked in every day.
The culture was, win at all costs. It was strictly driven by financial motive and opportunity. We were pre-IPO, and then we went public, and it became more and more and more about the money, the money, the money. There were never any discussions around compliance, rules, regulations, integrity, legality of it. Those conversations never took place in the conference or the boardroom. The only conversations that took place were around the numbers. If they were good, you would be acknowledged, but we always wanted more, and that came from the top.
Can you, before we continue, I'd like to, as simply as you can, explain the scheme again. Your role, perhaps what a doctor would do. If there were kickbacks, what does that mean? How did the doctor take a kickback? Summarize the scheme for us.
So the scheme simply was to identify physicians who would be willing to accept financial reward disguised as speaker program honorarium in exchange for them to prescribe more Subsys. That was it in a nutshell. So essentially, you might walk up to Dr. Jones and say, hey, next Thursday night, just come to dinner with a couple of your friends. Pick your favorite steakhouse. And by the way, you're speaking that night, you're going to get paid $1,800, right? But that only takes place after a conversation, a direct one-on-one conversation with either one of the directors or myself or one of the other higher ups would have a direct conversation with that physician to make it crystal clear that they are being paid in exchange for them to write more prescriptions of Subsys. Are they in or are they out? That was it.
Every 10 doctors you offered this scheme to, how many took it?
Not even one. No, it's far less than that. It's that I guess it could be some solace taken in that, right? No, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. You would think that everybody, or maybe you wouldn't think, but you would think that more people would be motivated by money because money is, is the root of all evil. But to be fair, the vast majority of physicians, you're lucky if they don't kick you out of their office, literally.
Now, before we get into how you learned that you were indicted, there are a number of physicians. I would argue more physicians go to trial than probably anyone else for these types of schemes. Many of them argue, I didn't think that it was wrong. I was doing my job, prescribing what I thought was in the best interest of our patient. If they wanted to pay me to get a fee to speak in the Bahamas, so be it. Are there some physicians who truly didn't think that it was wrong, or did all of them know they were participating in a ruse?
You're asking as far as the particular company, my specific company situation.
Yeah. Do you think some doctors thought, hey, they're legitimately paying me to give this a talk for $1,800 and it's not at all connected to the prescriptions I'm writing?
No, I don't think that, because the way in which we did our business, we didn't allow anything up for interpretation. You could lose your job by doing that. You spend $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 and put it in a doctor's pocket and there's no results, you're out of a job. So those conversations were very clear and concise. So, the fact is that every physician that participated in that program knew that they were being paid inappropriately.
As I understand it, Insys at one point had a market cap of more than $5 billion. The founder and CEO was a billionaire. All of this, of course, comes crumbling down. How did you learn that you were the target of a federal investigation?
I knew that there was a black cloud kind of hovering over us for a while, waiting for that shoe to drop. I had a civil attorney. Many of us were given a civil attorney to protect us. I'm not really even sure why or how or what was going on, but it wasn't a big deal. And then one day I got a call from my civil attorney and he said, Alec, I need to let you know I can't represent you anymore and you need to get a criminal attorney. And it is my understanding that not only are you a person of interest, but you've been moved to a subject. And it's either person of interest, subject, target. So, I'd say usually, if you're a subject, you're going to be moved to a target. So I was in California doing business. I was sitting having lunch on the water when I got that phone call. And, my life changed forever from that point moving forward.
Well, let's start to talk about some of the changes in managing a government investigation. I know you reached out to our team, you retained us, you're beginning to work with a lawyer. Do you understand what the sentencing guidelines are, what restitution can be, and how long they could potentially lock you up? Help us understand your initial response to the investigation.
My initial response to the investigation was, concern, grave concern, fear of the unknown, my future. What do I do now? Knowing that, I'm probably going to end up going to prison. And then what am I going to do in prison? And what am I going to do when I get out of prison? I mean, it's a lot to think about. So I started to reach out to people whom I thought might have something to offer. And that's quite frankly how I came across you.
Let's talk about the stakeholders for a moment. Our team encourages people, to put themselves in the perspective of the stakeholders, a prosecutor, a judge, a case manager. How would you describe the U.S. attorney? How would that U.S. attorney have described you after he indicted you and it was your name versus the United States of America? Help us understand that perception.
How would he have described me when I was initially indicted?
As a criminal, as a thug, as a thief, as a crook, not as a husband and father? What was his perception of you?
Yeah, no. When they first indicted me, they thought for sure that I was, the sleaziest man on the face of the earth, and that they certainly would not and could not believe a word I say, and if my lips were moving, I was lying. And initially they were right. There was a lot of that in me. There's a side to me that, you don't really want people to see. I think everybody has that side. But in my case, it's all out there, it's all over the internet. So all I can do is, embrace it and try to do the best I can to take proper steps forward. That will be good for me and good for others, that I'm around.
Some of that fallout, without getting to all of the details of friends and family with those DOJ releases, did you feel ostracized, forgotten about? Help us understand the true fallout from this government investigation before you even go to prison, all of the collateral consequences.
Yeah, no, you can't even, I can barely describe it. I mean, it never ends. And no matter how bad you think it's going to be, it's going to get worse. But, I got to keep it in perspective, regardless of whatever it is that happened. I was very fortunate. The judge took mercy on me. I served a light sentence in a minimum security place. So for me, I choose to just look forward and try to be grateful for, what I perceive to be a second opportunity for whatever reason, out of my control, maybe even. I'm going to make the most of it.
I want to talk about when you learned of the indictment, when you surrendered to prison, and the length of your sentence and what you actually pled guilty to. So 4 questions in one.
Yeah, it's a lot of questions, Judge.
It's a lot of questions.
I mean, when I learned of the indictment, like I said,
when was it? 18, 17? When did you learn that you were a target? What
2016, year? I was indicted.
When did you surrender to prison?
2020.
What did you plead guilty to?
RICO Conspiracy.
And what was the length of your sentence?
I was sentenced to 26 months. I did 10 months inside. I did 9 months in a halfway house and 3 months on home confinement. And then I proceeded to go to probation.
I want to talk for a few minutes about life in federal prison. You were there during COVID, which made it fundamentally more different, harder, especially with lockdowns and time in shoe. Can you help us understand life in federal prison and how that experience, it helped you? Did it make matters worse? How did you use that time on the inside?
Well, I can only speak from my own short experience, but it's an experience that, that you should never be a part of, right? There's nothing easy about being taken away from the people that you love. That's what I'll say about that. But, what I did in prison for me is I found something that could help me cope. I like to write. And I created a group email, and every day, I'd be in that room on the computer for hours, just telling a story of that day's events. And, what am I going to do with it? I have no idea. I have it. We'll see. I worked with a lot of inmates, helping them communicate with the medical staff, with, the assistant warden, the warden, send communications, send emails, address health issues. I found my niche, and I found a way to have purpose, not just for myself, but for other people around me. I found a way to, live with a little locker, a plastic chair, and a bed, right? A bunk bed. So you can look back on those experiences and, allow it to drag you down in the mud where you won't be able to get out like quicksand. Or you can look back and say, you know what? I did it. I don't know how I did it. I didn't know if I was going to do it, if I'm being honest with myself, but I did it. And there's something to be said for that to me.
Well, one thing you had through this experience was a very good perspective. And I'd like to think that came in part from working with Michael, who, as you all know, served a very long time in federal prison. I know when you were in prison, you began messaging Michael and said, I kind of want to follow your suit and use my experience through this system as an asset to try to help people and help myself as well. When did that realization come that I'm not going to run from this, pretend it didn't happen or never talk about it again, but write a book called Selling Hard, Lessons Learned, and embrace all of the fallout that accompanies speaking openly, because you know how some people are going to question your motives. When did you decide that you would write publicly and go public with your story?
Well, I mean, I got to toot you guys' horns on that one. That was a lot from you as well as Michael. I really loved Michael's confidence and conviction and his track record. And, we talked about what I like to do. What do I see myself doing in the future? And we talked about writing, and he was an instrumental part in helping me, get that book. Now that book sat for a while and it wasn't completed. I got out of prison and it was still sitting. It wasn't actually until I started dating my girlfriend, Kristen, and months down the road, she kind of gave me a kick in the butt to take it off the shelf and get it done and published. So you just don't know how things are going to go, and you can't always plan them, but you can try to position yourself appropriately and strategically, even when you're looking at a horrible scenario, so that you can come out the other end, maybe bigger, better, and stronger than you've ever been before.
To the extent that you can, as quickly as you can, walk us through the book you wrote and the purpose of the book. Who's the audience?
So the audience really is what I see as young working professionals, college students, graduate students, kids just straight out of school, guys 20, 25, 30. But the book is basically, it's an autobiography, while bringing in my professional life and all the kind of craziness and hoopla that went along with being a workaholic, and being an addict. I mean, I haven't made a bet since February 22nd, 2012. But I was a compulsive gambler. My personality lends itself to going too far, too long. And you have to, if you're someone like me, and my book speaks to this, you have to be able to find balance. And you also have to be able to find your moral compass. And you might say, you know what, I'm not worried about my moral compass. I'm worried about my wallet. I'm hoping my book gets people who think like that to rethink it one more time and say, you know what, I keep saying how important money is, but if it's a decision between money and literally ruining your family name and going to prison, and disgracing, your dad's last name, I think you're choosing, stay out of trouble, right? So, everybody in life, since we're little kids, we always think it's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to be the one that gets caught. Obviously, I don't say that anymore.
Before we transition to life after prison, I want to revert back to what a U.S. attorney might have said to a sentencing judge at your sentencing hearing, articulating that there are victims or people were hurt, or indeed they might have said people like Mr. Burlakoff contribute to our nation's problem with opioids, and I demand he be held accountable. Do you agree with that assessment? And how do you respond when people say you are part of the problem?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. If people would say that I'm still part of the problem, that would really bother me, but this isn't about me. This is about all the people who have fallen victim to the opioid pandemic. I did have a part in this. I don't want to take too much credit because this thing is enormous. But, from my own perspective, there's no question that I had a part. And, I need to be held responsible and be accountable and never forget, always be cognizant of the kind of pain that I cause. Again, not to drag myself down and beat myself up, but to ensure that I rise and do well and succeed at levels far different than what I used to measure myself by before I got in trouble.
You have to learn to find different measurements, because if we measure our success by money, it doesn't work, because we come home with nothing. We're rebuilding, which leads to restitution. Do you have any?
Yes. I have restitution. I have joint restitution with the CEO and the founder for a total of $59 million.
How many people in your case went to prison?
5 or 6.
5 or 6
from the company. Obviously, there were physicians and so forth, and nurse practitioners that also went.
We often discuss the value of honest work and starting over. And one way I credit you was embracing this rebuilding process. Some prisoners or former prisoners come home and feel some work might be beneath them. I used to be a doctor, a top salesman. You were managing like $1 billion sales organization, making big money, doing good things. Before you ever broke the law, you were doing it right. Then you went rogue. We know that. But you were successful well before you ever cheated, where some people are only successful because they've cheated. What you did well was embrace the idea, I will do anything to begin rebuilding and to earn a paycheck. You don't have to get into specifically what you have done since you're home as you're rebuilding. I know you don't love it, but I'd like you to discuss the value of starting over and rebuilding and just finding dignity in an honest paycheck.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I do. I go to work every day, and just a simple office. I work in a cubicle. I put in long hours. It's a 7-day-a-week job, and I make a fine living. I got no problems with it. I think that this is all still part of the process. I got indicted in 2016. It's 2023. I can't determine what year, this is going to end as far as rebuilding. In fact, I think that the best thing for me to do is to basically just count on being in the rebuilding process for the rest of my life. I think that for me would be quite positive, actually.
I'm working on a book called Reinvention 2.0, Rebuilding After a Felony Conviction. In chapter 2, where I mention you, I talk about done is better than perfect. There are some defendants come home, they're no longer a doctor, a lawyer, or stockbroker, and we move into a totally new space. And without that skill set, it can be hard, which of course means you want to begin to build that skill set in prison. But some people are so fearful of starting, they never start. What you have done well, I think, like public speaking, something I did when I came home, you just put it out there. You tried the failing, the embarrassment. Sometimes people are sleeping and drooling, but you said, I got to get it out there. I got to try. I got to start. So can you talk about that idea of done is better than perfect, of just starting?
Yeah, I believe in that 100%. I am not one of those people that won't try. I do not care about, being embarrassed or anything along those lines. I look at every opportunity that's presented to me, regardless of how small or how big, as a gift, and I'm going to take it. So, for me, I'm just, I enjoy the day-to-day process of it. I think that, the future is bright.
I want to transition to some questions from our community. So everyone watching, we have a new Earning Freedom community at school.com, SKOOL. I'll put up a description to the community I'll put up a link to the community in the description in case you'd like to join. Our weekly webinar is there, courses, books, just a really interactive community. And some people in our community ask some questions, including what is the best way to combat direction from a leader that feels unethical or wrong? In other words, you're a boss, you're telling a guy beneath you, to do bad things. How does that junior guy combat that if the boss is putting pressure on him?
I mean, to be realistic,
always.
You got to go. You got to leave. You're not going to win that battle. You're not. And you're going to be exhausted trying to fight it. If you're not comfortable, which is perfectly fine, we're all human beings, we're individuals, and we have to be comfortable in our own skin. And kudos to the guy that's not comfortable, crossing the line. And there's plenty of people out there like that. I used to think that everybody was a little shady. That's because my brain was thinking shady. That's not the way it is. There's plenty of people out there that get up every day and they do their job. They work hard. They don't break any rules. And you got to leave. You got to leave that job. Honestly, that's my answer.
A question came in from someone in our community about supervised release. How long were you on supervised release? Were you able to travel, speak? What was that process like while on supervision?
I mean, supervised release is, you feel the pressure, right? People are looking at you and watching over you. You want to stay out of harm's way and you want to make good decisions. I made a decision really to stay away from large crowds, not go to bars, nightclubs, just things like that. But as far as being on supervised release, if you're responsible and you do exactly what is asked of you, which is not very much, you're not going to have a problem. My probation officer was fantastic. He was appreciative of the fact that I made his job and his life easy by doing what he asked, which again, very, very reasonable. As far as traveling, I was able to travel. They spell it out nice and clear. You got to ask at least 2 weeks in advance. I asked months in advance and had all my paperwork. And you send it, you don't get a response. I send it again. You just got to dot your I's and cross your T's. You're responsible for you. They're not going to be like chasing you down, trying to find out what you did wrong. But you don't want to be doing something wrong, especially when you're on supervised release.
I would agree with that. As we begin to work our way through the end of this video, I want to touch on a question that someone asked. She wrote, you already touched on this, but how did you adapt your high energy personality to a much slower world, I imagine, in prison?
Yeah, that was difficult. That was really difficult. I tried to exercise as much as I possibly could during the day. I would literally, they had this term like you would ride in a car, right? And I rode in 3 cars, so my goal, I could care less about at the time getting in shape and, all that. My goal was to make sure I slept at night. I did whatever I could to tire myself out. So that kind of helped me and worked for me. And we don't have, there's no weights there or anything like that. There's a dirt track, and you got to make good on what you got, right? Push-ups, sit-ups, calisthenics, stuff like that. But supervised release is a very, very sensitive place to be, right? You're one mistake away from going back to prison. But if you just do what is going to be right and keep you out of trouble and just be proactive and preemptive, you're not going to have any issues.
Did you need to go to prison? In other words, are you happier? Have you learned as a result of this experience, or had you gotten probation? Would a part of you thought to yourself, I still got it. I can get my way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Justin. I don't know. It's like, I want to be honest with myself here, and I'm not even sure that I could be. I think that maybe if I just got probation, maybe I still would have had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, and I don't want it, and just like I did whatever I could to, stop gambling, like that chip on my shoulder, that ego, all that did was lead me to, my demise. So if going to prison was necessary, to do this for me, then I think it was a good experience overall.
A couple more questions. Prison was beneficial for me because I went lost and confused and excused and blamed everybody. And then I found a mentor, Michael. It took months for me to embrace his tutelage, but once I did, it changed my life. As you know, I'm proud to be the #1 ambassador of his work. It changed my life. So much what I have as a result of following that guidance and doing the work. I like to think in a way Michael mentored you to a degree. I did as well, which leads to the question of, and I know you address it in your book and in your talks, finding the right mentor, someone who will tell you the truth and hold you accountable, getting the sycophants and yes people out of your life. Talk about finding a mentor, whether you're going to prison or you'll never be involved in the system.
I mean, finding a mentor and the qualities that you would like a mentor to possess, I think is different based on your social and personality style. For me, I don't want somebody recommending a mentor to me, because there has to be a very specific type of demeanor and aura about that person in order for me to really be able to hear them and listen to them. And I need that. And I know what I need. So for me, it was a slow process. It's a to get to know you process. It's a fact finding process. But for me, it all comes down to, respect. Do I respect this person? And I also know that no person is perfect. So if I come across anybody that presents that way, that's not going to be my mentor, because, for me, my life is based on imperfections, and, making sure that I don't allow those character flaws to ever, negatively influence me or my behavior again.
So as we wrap up this interview, I'd like to address one more time, because I know some of the messages come in. He said he's sorry only because he got caught. They didn't come here, but they do. Now he's looking to go to Hollywood and be like Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. And there's always going to be the critics out there. And when someone watches this film, for example, Pain Hustlers on Netflix on October 27th, that you played a role in, you won't say it, Chris Evans, the lead actor, Mr. Superman or Mr. Marvel, that's you. And we know that, whether they say it or not. I want you to reiterate one more time as we close. There's stuff that's shown on television to get ratings, sort of like Frank Abagnale from Catch Me If You Can said, hey, Leonardo's going to do some things on that film. Might be a slightly different message in my book, Catch Me If You Can. And he addresses that in the epilogue of his book, Catch Me If You Can. I want you to reiterate that one more time, because people are going to watch this film and it's going to be good with a big budget and think, these guys are crooks. They preyed on people. They hurt people. Just draw on the difference again, because I know that you're remorseful and I know you're working to become better.
No, I appreciate that. It's a very slippery slope to answer that question, because I'm not here to defend myself, and I haven't seen the movie, and so I don't know what's there and what's accurate.
We have an idea, which is it's going to be. We've seen movies that have done this, and it's fine. Molly's Game, fantastic. We have an idea of what's coming. It's going to be.
We have an idea. We have a very good idea, and no, I don't think that it will be accurate. And no shame on them. They're writing a movie. They don't care. I did speak with them and do a little consulting work on the movie, but they could care less whether or not I consulted, to be honest with you. They're making a movie, and they're going to do it on their own terms. And yes, is it loosely based on the Insys Therapeutics, fiasco? And was I ahead of sales? Yes, I was. But I'm expecting to see the movie and see, I don't even think 15% of it will be accurate. That's just my personal assumption.
Got it. I share that because I know when the video comes out and people will Google Insys, you'll come up and this video will pop up, and I want them to see a different message that's conveyed. Final question, now that you've been home from prison for a while. What advice would you have to someone who has seen for the first time their name versus the United States of America? They're scared. They're watching our YouTube videos. They're looking to hire a lawyer. They're getting conflicting information. You waited 4 years before you went to jail, and I know that was the hardest part of the experience. What advice would you give to someone trapped in this really sickening system?
Best advice I could give them is, if they have ever fought any kind of addiction, or they have a friend who has, the best initial advice is one day at a time. You literally have to go one day at a time, and find something to live for. Like for me, it was my kids, but just one day at a time. And then in that day, in that 24-hour period, try to tell yourself, for an hour, I'm going to be productive. What does that mean? Well, I mean, find somebody that you can talk to, that you can consult with, someone that can guide you, that can help you, because you're in a very precarious situation. And now your mind, which you need it to be sharper than it's ever been, is dull. You're not thinking clearly. So you need to surround yourself by really good people, by smart people, and people that really love and care about you. And you're going to find out really fast who those people are, because the majority of them are going to disappear almost immediately.
And to the extent that you can, it's easier said than done. And I used to say this to you: you're not in prison. You may never go, but you're not in prison today. Live, be productive. It is easier than said, right? While you're going through struggle. And in retrospect, I would say that you got through it pretty well. And I'm happy that you're here now, sharing your story, informing, educating, inspiring, because we can all become better. And I love people who come and speak openly about it. I'll leave the last word to you, and I'm really grateful that you've spent so much time with us today.
No, listen, I just want to take this opportunity, honestly, Justin, just to thank you for your friendship and for your guidance through the years, and getting me through a very difficult time. I'm here to help in any way I can, whether it be you or, people that are in your group, associated with your organization. I'm just, happy to oblige in any way I can. So, let me know.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm going to put up a link to Alec's book that you can get on Amazon. I'm going to put up a link to our new community in school if you'd like to join, if you're going through this system. And we're all grateful that you're here. And Alec, one more time, thank you for speaking so openly and being vulnerable today. We all learned something. Thank you again.
Thank you, Justin.